from the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador. I am Estefania Bravo. This is From the South. Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro says he is open to dialogue after the attempted coup d'etat against his government on Wednesday. Addressing the Supreme Court, he has also announced the Venezuelan embassy in the U.S. will close. This as response to the constant attacks from the Trump administration to his country. Maduro spoke at the Supreme Court one day after the president of the opposition-controlled National Assembly, Juan Guaidó, proclaimed himself interim president of the country.
That two Latin American governments have taken an initiative that I believe must be the road. The dialogue, diplomatic relation. The government of Mexico and the government of Uruguay have proposed to create an international initiative to promote the dialogue of the parties in Venezuela, to seek a negotiation, to seek an agreement of national peace. I tell the governments of Mexico and Uruguay that I agree with this diplomatic agreement for national dialogue in Venezuela. I am ready for dialogue, for understanding, for negotiation, for agreement. I decided to return the entire diplomatic and consular personnel and close the embassy and all consulates of the United States.
And opposition leader Juan Guaidó has been accused of violating the Constitution by proclaiming himself as Venezuela's new president. Meanwhile, the Chavista people have rejected Guaidó's self-proclamation and recognized once again Nicolas Maduro's presidency as the only legitimate one. Madeleine Garcia has the story.
Nosotros estamos en busca de la paz, no en busca de la guerra. Yankee, go home!
And the day was just beginning. The Chavista people's chanting encouraged others to spread peace among sisters and brothers.
We, the revolutionaries, do not hate anybody. Our heart and our soul is only full with love and with ideological visions. All we need is a free country, for all of us, because we are all human and we all have the right to live in the same territory.
As time passed, the Chavista people filled the streets to defend democracy, to defend their vote, and to protest against foreign interference. Then suddenly, Juan Guaidó illegally swore himself in as acting president.
I swear to formally take all the national executive's abilities as the new acting president of Venezuela.
Reactions came swiftly afterwards.
Nobody voted for this person. Nobody. They were invited to participate in last election and they didn't want to be there. How do they want to be an authority if they were not even elected? I voted for Maduro. My vote is for Maduro. Who voted for this guy? Who just swore? Nobody.
It's a terrible mistake what this kid is doing.
That's a joke for us. It's not legit. Our president is Nicolas Maduro Moros.
The president of the Supreme Court of Justice has already said that any act of contempt of the National Assembly is invalid.
President is not anybody who just wants to be it. It's who earns it, who fights and talks with the people, not a clown that shows his ass and tries to take the piss out of us.
The mobilization's final destination was the O'Leary Square, where the president of the National Assembly warned of the ongoing coup d'etat.
They have absolutely no shame in violating the Constitution that was approved by our people. They know that they can't do that. They're trying to do whatever they want. We, on the other hand, are committed to defending our constitution.
This chapter of history was barely beginning. The people walked to the president's palace to meet the Venezuelan president, who called the U.S. interference an irresponsible act that only provoked violence between Venezuelan people.
As the constitutional president, I announced to all the free nations of the world that I swore to the Venezuelan people that I would respect the independence, the sovereignty, and the peace of this republic. And that's why I decided to break all diplomatic and political ties with the imperialist government of the United States. Get out of Venezuela. Enough with your interference. Government of the United States. Get out of Venezuela. Enough with your interference.
And actions have consequences.
That's justice's duty. That's already a duty of the Venezuelan justice bodies to act according to the Venezuelan laws. That's already a matter of the justice to preserve the state, democratic order, and Venezuelan law.
The Chavista people will stay on the streets to raise their voices and to defend their president, Nicolas Maduro.
Meanwhile, the U.S. has requested that UN Security Council holds an extraordinary meeting on Venezuela this Saturday. The Trump administration wants to pressure other nations to recognize self-proclaimed Juan Guaidó as the legitimate Venezuelan president. It is expected that the U.S. will also ask for new sanctions against the government of Maduro. The Trump administration is considering more sanctions that would specifically target the country's oil. U.S. officials are reportedly considering several measures, including restrictions on U.S. import of Venezuelan oil or possibly even a full ban. But no final decision has been made. U.S. sanctions already in place have cost Venezuela billions of dollars.
Well, we were planning on doing a really...
And in Washington, the U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo was interrupted by a protester at a meeting of the Organization of American States. The protester from the NGO Code Pink accused the U.S. and its allies of supporting a coup in Venezuela. Pompeo was urging Latin American countries to support Guaidó. Venezuela has been the main topic of discussion at the OAS. Despite the organization's Secretary General Luis Almagro is supporting the opposition, different country members are recognizing Venezuela's government.
This session is aimed at interfering in the domestic issues of Venezuela, something that goes against this organization, its nature and principles. This room has been transformed into a center for conspiracy against the sovereign nations of Latin America and the Caribbean.
And the OAS Permanent Council came under harsh criticism from St. Vincent and the Grenadines for interfering in Venezuela's affairs. Its ambassador tore into the group for its failure to convene the special session without the approval and inclusion of Venezuela.
The delegation of St. Vincent and the Grenadines firmly rejects the convocation of this, yet another special session of the Permanent Council to consider the recent development in Venezuela, as it is taking place without the consent of the duly accredited representatives of the member states concerned. My delegation, in its adherence to its principled and fraternal stance on Venezuela and consistent with the fundamental principles of respect for sovereignty and non-interference in the internal affairs of another state, has always decried and deplored and will continue to decry and deplore the gross and unconscionable violation of Article 1 of the Charter of the Organization of American States.
And the Caribbean nation of St. Lucia has not joined the rest of the Lima group in publicly declaring support for Venezuela's opposition leader. The country's foreign affairs minister has even reaffirmed St. Lucia's support for Venezuela in an earlier statement.
We continue to recognize Venezuela as a friend. We have called upon the government to recognize the principles of democracy. And this is not to say that we will not continue to encourage them to do that. The breaking of diplomatic relations is something that is considered on a case-by-case basis. We are not considering that at all. St. Lucia has had a long historical friendship with Venezuela, and the fact that you call upon a friend to do what is right doesn't mean that you intend to sever the friendship, doesn't mean that you cannot continue to engage in matters of mutual interest. But we're saying too that we do not support the principle of intervention. It's about non-intervention in the affairs, in the domestic affairs of state. All of the declarations we've signed, we've always made it very clear that this is a matter for the people of Venezuela to resolve, and we're calling on the government and opposition to resolve this matter.
Our correspondent Alison Kentish is in Castries and has those details.
2 weeks ago, St. Lucia joined the 18 members of the Permanent Council of the Organization of American States, OAS, voting not to recognize the legitimacy of Nicolas Maduro's second term as president of Venezuela. But this week, the Caribbean nation was one of 3 members of the Lima group, which held out on a joint statement recognizing Venezuela's opposition leader, Juan Guaido, as the legitimate president. Guyana and Mexico are the other 2 countries which did not endorse the opposition leader. Now, while it might seem like a strange move for St. Lucia, bearing in mind the OAS vote, a January 14th statement by St. Lucia's Minister for Foreign Affairs might help to shed some light on the situation. Sarah Flood-Bober told members of the St. Lucia press that St. Lucia does not support the principle of intervention. She said it has always been about non-intervention in the domestic affairs of any country. She also added that St. Lucia has always made it clear that the people of Venezuela should resolve this matter without interference or without intervention. Mexico has also upheld the principle of non-intervention. Guyanese officials have not spoken out on that country's decision to hold out from signing the Lima Declaration, and after voting with the majority of the OAS Permanent Council not to recognize Nicolas Maduro as president. St. Lucia was the first country in the 15-member Caribbean Community CARICOM bloc to join the Lima group. Alison Kentish in Castries, St. Lucia, reporting for Telesur English.
We thank Alison for that report. Leaders of the Caribbean Community CARICOM have held a special emergency meeting to discuss the ongoing situation in Venezuela. Heads of governments from around the region have taken part in the session via video conference, including Trinidad and Tobago's Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley and his Foreign Affairs Minister. Meanwhile, Jamaica has said it is monitoring the situation in Venezuela, and its primary concern is the people's well-being, respect for human rights, and the rule of law. However, CARICOM is yet to issue an official position on Venezuela.
You have before you over the next 2 days conference.
Mexico's President Andrés Manuel López Obrador has defended his government's position of non-interference in Venezuela. The country adopted a position of non-intervention with regards to the political standoff in Venezuela.
Article 89 of our Constitution stipulates that in foreign policy we must conduct ourselves with the principles of non-intervention, of self-determination, of the pacifistic soul of the controversies. In what is happening in Venezuela, I support the position assumed by the Foreign Affairs Secretary.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. One of Brazil's few openly gay congressmen has left the country because of mounting death threats against him. John Willis has also given up his seat in Congress. Willis says he is often targeted by conservative groups on social media for advocating for LGBTI rights. His party colleague Mariel Franco was murdered last year. Pope Francis has regretted the difficulties the Latin American youth faces in their future during his visit to Panama. He especially regretted the, quote, plague of femicides and violence hitting the region.
Young people find themselves boxed in and lacking opportunities amid highly conflictual situations with no quick solution. Domestic violence, the killing of women, our continent is experiencing a plague in this regard. Armed gangs and criminals, drug trafficking, the sexual exploitation of minors and young people, and so on.
And Pope Francis will formally open World Youth Day celebrations this Thursday. The event has drawn around 200,000 young people from around the world to Panama City, where the Pope is expected to defend Central American migrants and human rights. The pontiff will spend 5 days in the country, reaching out to young Catholics. Victims of sexual abuse by the clergy are seeking to meet with Pope Francis to ask for his support. 2 Costa Rican men have accused a local priest of sexual abusing them throughout their teenage years. Although the priest was eventually removed from his post, the victims say he has never received advocate punishment for his crimes. The 2 men requested a personal audience with the Pope to address the issue of widespread sexual abuse in the region.
It's been normal to see comments on Twitter and Facebook where they say, well, surely they like it because they stayed there so long. People do not know maybe the power that our religious figure has. One cannot speak or maybe one freezes on the moment. They are complicated situations.
Hundreds of Venezuelans have disembarked in Caracas as part of the government's return to the homeland plan. 3 flights were commissioned from Ecuador after a wave of xenophobic attacks in the country. To this date, the return to the homeland plan has helped over 9,000 people return to Venezuela from various Latin American countries, with more expected to arrive in the coming months. We heard their testimonies before they left Ecuador.
The day the tragedy occurred, the xenophobia started. I was attacked by a group of Ecuadorians when I was going back to work. They burned my clothes that were there. Me and some colleagues took refuge in a fruit store and they tried to enter, so we had to protect ourselves. And yesterday they returned. They had sticks, pipes, machetes, and we had to run away.
It's been a while since I'm trying to return, because we couldn't find a job here. So it's great that the president launched this program. It's very good for us.
In Brazil, Praia Grande near Sao Paulo has become a popular seaside destination for workers. During the summer season, its population explodes, and so does business for local beach vendors.
Alexandre Davido is a school caretaker who is on vacation with his family in a rented beach house.
I'm making some snacks to bring to the beach, frying some shrimp and some chicken. I'm going to fry up some sausage too.
After the 2016 parliamentary coup against Dilma Rousseff, the Brazilian government made it easier for employers to deny paid vacation to their workers. As a result, more people are vacationing closer to home this year, taking the bus instead of flying. For most of the year, Praia Grande has a population of 300,000, but in summer it swells to over 1 million. Its proximity to São Paulo and low prices have made it Brazil's 4th most popular vacation destination, and this year business is booming for the beach vendors.
This year things are a lot better. Last year the national crisis hurt us a lot.
It may not be the nation's most beautiful beach, but it's clean and its gentle waves make it relatively safe for children. Things might not be looking so bright for Brazil politically at the moment, but a sunny day on the beach with loved ones offers a chance for working-class Brazilians like Alexandre to forget about their problems and enjoy the best things that life has to offer.
I like Praia Grande because it's close to Sao Paulo. We can bring whatever we want to the beach. The prices are low and we can have fun somewhere nearby and inexpensive.
Brian Mir, Telesur, Praia Grande.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. The Democratic Republic of Congo's newly sworn-in president, Felix Tshisekedi, has promised to release all political prisoners. In his inaugural speech, he also pledged to uphold citizens' human and political rights. Tshisekedi was declared the winner of the presidential election that was delayed 3 times.
Accordingly, the Minister of Justice will be responsible for identifying all political prisoners of opinion or assimilated throughout the national territory, with the aim of releasing them in the near future.
Tshisekedi was sworn in as president of the DR Congo. The inauguration took place at the Palace of the Nation in the capital, Kinshasa. He takes over the helm from Joseph Kabila, who ruled the country for 18 years, succeeding his father, Laurent Desire Kabila. Sudanese police have blocked hundreds of anti-government protesters trying to march on the presidential palace in Khartoum. Police fired tear gas at the demonstrators who are urging President Omar al-Bashir to resign. More than a month, the East African nation has been rocked by deadly protests triggered by the government's decision to triple the price of bread. And protests are also hitting Spain. Police have clashed with taxi drivers in the capital, Madrid, as the drivers' protest entered its 4th day. The taxi drivers have been demonstrating against what they call an unfair competition with taxi applications such as Uber and Cabify. These apps are not subject to the same regulations and taxes as they do. The protests have resulted in dozens of people arrested and injured. Nigeria's leading female presidential candidate has withdrawn from the upcoming election. 55-year-old Obi Ezekwesili says she decided to drop out after extensive consultations with various leaders from across the country. She is now focusing on helping to build a coalition. General elections will be held in Nigeria on February 16th. The Hamas leadership in the occupied Gaza Strip has rejected a financial grant from Qatar due to the conditions placed by Israel on the funds. The movement says they will not accept the funds as long as they come with conditions. These specific conditions have not been disclosed.
We refuse to receive the 3rd Qatari grant in response to the Israeli occupation's behavior and attempts to evade the agreement brokered by Egypt, the United Nations, and Qatar. We hold the Israeli occupation responsible for this delay, this setback and blackmail attempt.
South Africa prides itself on being the most industrialized country on the African continent. But this doesn't always mean good news for the population, as the number of young South Africans suffering from obesity doubled in 6 years. Matuba Malachiet looks into some of the contributing factors.
Research shows that South Africa is going through rapid socio-economic and demographic changes that have triggered a rapid change in eating habits, although Thabiso Mahlape blames her obesity on family factors beyond her control.
My mother died when I was 12. And my mom was the kind of mother that I am, very loving, very cuddly, very kissy. And when she died, and my dad raised us, as 3 of us, my dad raised us by himself, and my dad doesn't know how to say I love you. My dad doesn't, he's not a man of words, you know. But I think in his trying to prove that he could raise us himself as a man, and you know, this is like 90s South Africa, black men aren't expected to do a lot of things like that.
She says she does agree that the country's growing capitalist economy plays a role in changing the lives of its citizens, and she's no exception.
There's a new Clicks that's just opened on the freeway. So you literally don't have to go into a shopping center, park and walk, right? You can literally park in front of the door and walk 2 steps into the shop and come out. And I mean, I was very excited because, you know, but eventually I was like, actually this is not cute, because before I had a car I was much smaller than this, because I walked everywhere, so in between taxis and in between buses, but I was walking.
Thabiso is in her early 30s and is also a single mother to a 5-year-old. She says she's doing everything she can to break what could be a generational crisis of obesity in her family.
And now her biggest realization of late is that, Mommy, you're fat. Why are you so fat, Mommy? look here, mommy, look, you're so fat, mommy. And then her friends, and they come, and she doesn't think it's an insult, because she's also a little chubby, you know, and she doesn't know that that's gonna be, you know, that could be her. So we have a lot of fights over food. I'm trying to relax them now, so I buy her juice now, which was things I'd never buy in the house, because I've placed my own neurosis onto how I was raising her. So it's a bit of a turbulent relationship.
Obesity can complicate the mental health of those who suffer from it, and this can be a vicious cycle between the two, leading to fatal diseases. Matuba Mahlachi, Telesur in Pretoria.
And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.